I am pleased to propose the fiscal year 2023 budget for the City of Newton. This proposed budget calls for a $480 million operating budget, $61 million in water, sewer, and stormwater enterprise funding, and $5.6 million in community preservation funds. This reflects an increase in the operating budget from last year of $17.3 million, and it includes $262 million for the Newton Public Schools, which is almost a $9 million increase from a year ago. 2 years ago, during the early days of the pandemic, our budget, by necessity, focused on maintaining essential services and supporting our residents, businesses, and nonprofits. We paused almost all capital investments, slowed spending, filled only critical open positions, and adjusted the Newton pension funding schedule. That FY2021 budget was pragmatic. We deferred investments and initiatives, but preserved our ability to deliver our core services and help our community through what we hope is the worst of COVID-19. Unfortunately, we continue to face soft revenues in a number of key areas. Newton's largest portion of state aid, $26 million, is for education. Called Chapter 70, it increased by only 1.88% for this coming year. The next major state aid budget is unrestricted general government aid. At $6.2 million, it grew by only 2.7%. Both of these modest increases trail cost escalations facing the city, from trash and recycling, busing, fuel and utilities, construction, healthcare, and more. We are also seeing lower revenues than before the pandemic in rooms and meals taxes, motor vehicle excise taxes, parking meter and ticket collections, and interest income on our investments. All told, we are projecting these 4 revenue sources to be close to $3.9 million less than we budgeted in FY 2020 before the pandemic. In the face of these soft revenues, we made the decision to use $3 million of the city's one-time American Rescue Plan Act funds to bring our revenues to $480 million for FY 2023, so we can continue to do critical work. This $3 million supplements revenues that the pandemic impacted. Our strategy is to taper the use of ARPA funds for our operating budget. We intentionally cut back from $4.6 million a year ago, and we will taper again next year. Otherwise, Newton would face a dangerous financial cliff of our own making. Additionally, we are prudently holding some ARPA funds in reserve in case we experience another nasty turn from the virus, and with it, additional costs. What a different place we are in now, not just from the early days of the pandemic, but from 5 years ago. We continue to make progress on programs and initiatives prioritized by my administration: diversity, equity, and inclusion, translation and interpretation services, an energy coach and action steps from a climate action plan, and traffic calming, to name a few. Our financial commitment to building maintenance and conservation lands has essentially doubled from 5 years ago, while funds for the social, emotional, and mental health of people of all ages has almost tripled. Our investments in our athletic fields have grown tenfold, and in arts and culture, 20-fold. Investments for our road work, grounds and field maintenance, and urban trees have grown meaningfully. As a city budget is a reflection of our values, this budget prioritizes our people, our places, and our future. Our future is our children. And this FY2023 budget prioritizes our students and the Newton Public Schools. Our other departments altogether, police, fire, health and human services, public works, parks, recreation and culture, the library, and so many more, are seeing their budgets increase by only 3%, or $4.2 million in total. The Newton Public Schools receive a larger increase of 3.5%, or $8.9 million. A budget that the school committee discussed extensively with the leadership of school committee chair Tamika Olszewski and voted for almost unanimously last week. My administration has simultaneously ensured that the Newton Public Schools have access to funding from federal and state sources to cover in full all COVID costs. Of the $7.8 million in federal CARES Act funds that came to the city, we allocated 82%, or $6.4 million, to MPS to support the health and safety of our students, educators, and staff. Thus far, we have invested $16 million of our Arpa funds in our students and MPS. I've also directed an additional $1.7 million in funding to MPS from other sources, including FEMA, free cash, the operating budget, and cannabis host community agreement funds. To summarize, in addition to the more than $10.7 million of federal and state funding that went straight to the Newton Public Schools, my administration has directed more than $24 million of funds that came to the city over to MPS. This significant funding is fitting and proper, as our public schools are the bedrock of our community. Let me turn to a few highlights in the proposed municipal department budgets. This budget includes a new initiative by the Department of Public Works to save money and to improve service by bringing yard waste collection in-house. The contractors struggled last year to fulfill their obligations and collect yard waste on schedule. DPW analyzed the situation and put together a plan of renting trucks and hiring a collection team. We expect to save several $100,000 during FY2023. We've also shifted waste and recycling pickup from parks and village centers over to DPW's Sustainable Materials Management team to be more efficient. Our strong commitment to expanding affordable housing in the city is also a focus of this budget. We have selected a development team to provide deeply affordable housing at the West Newton Armory. We are also adding a housing program manager position to expand our efforts for development of new affordable and mixed-use housing. One early action item will be to move forward with the transformation of the Walker Center properties into long-term affordable housing opportunities. Economic development has long been an important focus of city and council efforts. A life sciences cluster is coming to Riverside. Given our approvals of commercial and housing projects and the two major developments at Northland and Riverside, the city must pay close attention to special and comprehensive permits. We are adding a deputy chief planner for current projects position in the planning department. This new position will coordinate the building permit review process for large projects with counselors, residents, consultants, and staff across city departments, and track compliance through our new Gov system. The Inspectional Services Department will supplement its resources with specialized inspectors and will charge the cost for them back to Northland and Riverside. What gets built must match the conditions specified by the City Council and its Land Use Committee under the leadership of its chair and Council Vice President, Rick Lipoff. This budget also continues to fulfill obligations made over decades that have not been funded sufficiently. Our promises to our retirees. Commitment to fully funding these long-term retiree liabilities is critical for our employees and for the City of Newton's financial sustainability. The city's long-term pension and retiree health insurance obligations currently exceed $1 billion. It took decades to dig this deep hole, but we are on schedule with our funding strategy. In the next 8 years, we are fully funding our pensions, and we're on track for our retiree health care at fiscal year 2045. This means a 9.6% year-over-year increase into our pension fund for FY2023 for a total of $52 million. Let me turn now to the use of our one-time Arpa funds. My goals are to use the $63.2 million to seed initiatives that will help Newtonians and our city not just stabilize and recover, but become permanently more resilient, livable, inclusive, and sustainable. We are investing these funds across all geographic areas of Newton, all ages and ethnicities, with a particular focus on supporting those in our community disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. We will continue to seek input as we make our ARPA decisions. Many Newtonians have provided great ideas. Our city councilors and school committee members continue to weigh in. Residents, community groups, businesses, and nonprofits have spoken up. Keep sharing your thoughts and ideas. Send emails to arpainput@newtonma.gov or come to my open office hours in person or by phone. We continue to be transparent about the sources and uses of all our federal and state funds. Again, this year, we have a section of the budget called ARPA, the Coronavirus Pandemic, and COVID-19 Funding, which details all funding that Newton has received or is expected to receive, as well as how we are using that funding. We're also adhering to the very specific requirements and rules for how a municipality can use its ARPA funds. When I gave the budget address a year ago, we had only committed ARPA funding for 2 initiatives. The first was supporting the operations of the Newton Public Schools and city departments. I augmented last year's FY2022 budget by 1% or $4.6 million with ARPA funding. Second, we had cut $4 million of spending early in the pandemic out of our paving budget, and I restored $2.5 million of that as our roads need work. A year later, we have committed an additional $22.8 million of the ARPA funds, or $29.9 million in total. We have focused our investments in 3 critical areas: residents facing hardships and needing housing stability, helping our village centers thrive, and moving forward on infrastructure for people of all ages. First, we're using ARPA funding to assist Newtonians who suffered disproportionately as a result of the pandemic. ARPA investments complement funding previously deployed, including $418,000 in CARES funds, $2.7 million of CPA funds, $1.7 million in community development funds, and $1.1 million in emergency solutions grants. All of these dollars have supported pandemic relief, housing and rental assistance, and health and human services. More is needed. I, along with our social services and housing staff, are acutely aware that the human impact of the pandemic is still being felt. A few days ago, I announced that our annual action plan uses an additional $3.5 million in federal funds to support affordable housing, rental assistance, human services, and architectural access here in Newton in fiscal year 2023. Tonight, I am proud to announce that we will dedicate another $2 million in ARPA funds to support low-income residents and residents impacted by the pandemic, both of which are disproportionately people of color. We will make $250,000 available for low-barrier emergency expenses, such as rent and utility assistance, to address immediate hardships, and $1.7 million for long-term economic mobility and self-sufficiency initiatives that address systemic barriers. This funding again complements the approximately $2 million in ARPA funds that we have already committed to rent and utility relief and affordable housing. One of our important goals is to make a permanent impact on affordable housing availability and stability. These ARPA investments, coupled with the development of the West Newton Armory and our support of the good work of partners, such as Two Life Communities, the Newton Housing Authority, the Newton Community Development Foundation, and Metro West, reinforces our forward momentum. Second, we are using ARPA funds to help our village centers, commercial corridors, businesses, and nonprofits recover and permanently thrive. We are improving our streets, sidewalks, and village centers so drivers, bicyclists, and pedestrians can get to and from our small businesses and restaurants and enjoy themselves even more when there. In addition to the $610,000 of CDBG small business recovery grants, we have made targeted investments in the restaurant and arts and culture sectors. These Main Street economic drivers help us connect and find joy and contribute to economic and village life. What a vibrant restaurant and arts and culture scene we have here in Newton. ARPA investments in jobs and street trees, an outdoor pavilion and a bicycle and pedestrian master plan, and a Newton Highlands Village Center design will make Newton permanently a better, greener, more accessible and livable city to shop and to work, as well as to live and to play. Third, we are investing ARPA funds to strengthen the Newton Public Schools in the city. This includes the aforementioned $3 million to support the operations of NPS and city departments. And it also includes jumpstarting much needed renovations for elementary school buildings, Lincoln Elliott, Countryside, Franklin, and Horace Mann. We are adding lights at the remaining unlit artificial turf fields at Newton South High School's Brandeis Field and at the Newton North High School Stadium to provide more capacity. We are improving parks and trails and adding a community garden on the north side of the city. We are putting the finishing touches on the $2 million expansion of the library's children's room and continuing work on police headquarters, fire stations 1 and 2, City Hall, and the new home for the Senior Center, or NewCal, in Newtonville, all a result of ARPA. Let me also focus on our support for our school and city employees. From the early days of the pandemic, I have been committed to the health and safety of the people that educate our children, support our families and caregivers, take care of our village centers and road network, provide health and social services, keep us safe, plan for our future, look out for our elders, increase affordable housing, care for our green and recreational spaces, and bring us art and music, books and ideas, and leadership and action on sustainability. We pay fair wages. We provide excellent health care. We fund the promises we made on retiree benefits. And we also used ARPA funds for stipends to recognize their enormous efforts on behalf of all of us during the pandemic, and for their commitment to public health, public service, and within MPS, to public education. I am also submitting our supplemental capital improvement plan tonight. The investments detailed in the FY2023 to FY2027 CIP and supplemental CIP make great progress on continuing the city's rebound from the challenges created by the pandemic and invest in our future for residents of all ages and needs in our commercial areas and in our operations. I already mentioned a number of projects funded with ARPA. The CIP also includes major investments in our parks, recreation, and culture resources, including athletic field upgrades, trail improvements, court and playground work, and swimming pool and Crystal Lake projects. With Newtonville and West Newton Square enhancements essentially completed, the Public Works and Planning departments are getting started on 2 new large complete streets projects: pilot improvements to Washington Street and village center improvements in Newton Highlands. The fire department will procure a new Engine 7 to keep all frontline equipment within the 15-year age standard. The police department will work closely with public buildings on a major overhaul to their headquarters complex in West Newton Square. The new home for our Newton Early Childhood Program, NECP, will be completed this calendar year, while the $40 million new home for the Lincoln Elliott Elementary Community at 150 Jackson Road is moving quickly ahead. Feasibility studies are underway for 3 elementary school buildings: Countryside with MSBA funding, Franklin, and Horace Mann. We also continue significant investments in our water and sewer systems that do pay off in our MWRA assessments. And we're making investments in stormwater resources to address climate change, to protect the Charles River, and to comply with new federal requirements. Let me talk about our strategy for ensuring the city's financial sustainability. Despite the pandemic, and even in the face of inflationary pressures, our finances are rock solid. That is a result of our rock solid team. Our department heads, Chief Operating Officer Jonathan Yeo, and Chief Financial Officer Maureen Lemieux are helping me make the day-to-day decisions and crafting the overall strategy to keep our city strong. I'm grateful to each of them and to Perry Rosenfeld, who literally pulled together all the disparate parts of the budget and supplemental CIP. Thank you, Perry. The city of Newton has rightfully earned the highest bond rating, AAA, for over a decade. We have remained steadfast in our determination to address infrastructure needs, provide services our residents need and want, fully fund all liabilities from debt service to pensions to retiree health care, and maintain an appropriate level of reserves for economic down cycles, dramatic weather situations, new COVID variants, and unpredictable events, all with a balanced annual operating budget and the use of one-time funds primarily for one-time costs. And yet, even with our financial strength and increasing budgets, we're facing challenges. Costs are up, needs have increased, our expectations are high. Both you and I continue to insist on excellence in all areas, from schools to road conditions, climate action to fields and parks. Despite a 3.5% increase for the Newton Public Schools budget and a 3% increase for the municipal departments, we still had to make difficult choices this year. This budget balances our ambitions for Newton with our fiscal reality. Pragmatism must continue to guide us as we navigate complex economic trends. We will continue to carefully evaluate the many needs within our community and the opportunities for investing our city and ARPA funds. We will be judicious in our deliberations, transparent in our decision-making, and relentless in our search for efficiencies. We will continue to watch every single penny. Together, we will decide if we need to do more or move more quickly on our initiatives beyond the capacity of our current revenues and American Rescue Plan Act funds.